Takže dobrý den, já vás vítám na dnešním webináři, omlouvám se za drobné zpoždění, teď už bude určitě všechno v pořádku, bez problému. Moje jméno je Michal Svoboda, jsem ze společnosti Albertina Ikome Praha, která tady vydavatelství CABI Publishing pro Českou republiku zastupuje. Je tady i moje kolegyně ze Slovenska, Lucie Poledníková. A dneska bychom vám rádi představili kolekci CABI Compendium, což je taková kolekce vědeckých informací z oblasti zemědělství z různých oblastí, která obsahuje mimo jiné datové listy a další užitečné informace. Máme tady dneska paní Apolline Rinaldo a Jamese Culluma z vydavatelství CABI Publishing, který vás právě tu službu představí, budou vás informovat o nějakých novinkách a v případě, že budou nějaké dotazy, tak samozřejmě rádi zodpoví. Dnešní webinář bude nahrávaný, takže bude k dispozici i vašim kolegům, kteří se nemohli zúčastnit, případně ji můžete využít třeba pro výuku. Takže já děkuji a předávám slovo zástupcům CABI. Pauline, the floor is yours.
Thank you for the introduction. Good morning. I'm Apolline. I'm the regional sales manager at CABI for Czechia and Slovakia. Thank you for joining this presentation about CABI Compendium. So as we are a publisher focusing on life sciences, and we have databases, ebooks, cases, journals, but today this presentation is about our compendium, and James will present to you now.
But yes, while I'm loading them up, again, sorry for being late to the meeting this morning. It's good to see you all. Nice to have the opportunity to talk to you about the compendium. My name is James Cullum, and I am a content and data analyst with the CABI Publishing business, specifically working on CABI Compendium and other associated tools and projects that go along with that. It is currently opening my presentation, so hopefully I'll have it ready in just a moment and I'll get started. My plan is to go through some slides which will give a overview of the compendium, what it is, what it looks like, what we plan to do with it and that sort of thing. And then after that, we can actually have a look at the compendium directly if there's any questions that haven't been answered or anything like that. It's also an option. I'm hoping that we cover it fairly well with the slide set. Here we go. Can we see that?
Yes, thank you.
Great. Thank you. Okay, right. So let's go. So as I said, this is an introduction to CABI Compendium. CABI Compendium it is at the highest level, it brings together international data for environmental and agricultural production, health and biosecurity, which makes it a comprehensive resource covering a broad scope, ideal to suit student and professional users across many different sectors. At its core, CABI Compendium is a datasheet resource. So what that means is it contains about 80,000 data sheets, most of which focus on species. But there are some other types of data sheets like breeds, diseases, or key topics, and there's a whole mix of different things in there, but most are species. And by data sheet, what we mean is it's relatively self-explanatory. They are web pages with associated PDFs they contain text and table data about the datasheet topic, but also images and maps and distribution information if applicable, and that sort of thing there. So it's sort of a collection of data. You can see on the left of this slide here, it's a bit blurry because it's very zoomed out, but you can see this is the top of a data sheet as an example, and I'll go through a data sheet more in more detail in a moment. But of our 80,000 data sheets, 7,000 of which 7,000 are what we call enhanced, which means they have been commissioned from and written by a species expert. So they're really the best information you can possibly get on that species. The others are what we call basic data sheets, which still contain a lot of valuable information, but haven't generally been contributed by species experts. So I mentioned the different content within a datasheet as well. I should also touch on the associated tools. I'm not going to go into great detail on these right now because obviously the focus is on the compendium itself, but built off the underlying data that's contained within CABI Compendium. We have the horizon scanning tool, the pest risk analysis tool, and the invasive species discovery tool, which are just various different tools that are used to support different processes or different. This is a search tool, the invasive species discovery tool. Very useful in their own way, depending on the use case. Right. Just to quickly touch on the core coverage, I mentioned that it's kind of agricultural information and among other things. This shows the core coverage of CABI Compendium. So you can see that we have going around from the top: animal health, aquaculture, crop protection, food safety and quality, forestry, horticulture, invasive species, and seed-borne pest information. And obviously, a lot of this has sort of crosstalk between the channels. We separate the compendium into channels, and the data sheets appear within one or more channels. So something that is an invasive species but also a threat to crops would appear in both the invasive species channel and the crop protection channel. Also, perhaps the horticulture channel or the forestry seedborne pest, this sort of thing. And there's an awful lot of sharing between the two, but also a lot of you can navigate from datasheet to datasheet, which I'll go through in a bit more detail in a minute. Again, from channel to channel, it links everything up very well in the way it's designed. So that's the core coverage. We've also got to mention the commodity channels. These have been relatively recently added to the compendium offering, in which we have data sheets brought together of relevance to specific commodity crops of economic importance. So far we have coffee, cotton, maize, and rice. So this is where, if you can imagine on the previous slide, where we might have had within crop protection, we might have had maize and the pests of maize. The maize channel kind of like brings that together, brings everything of relevance to maize from any channel and sort of puts it in one place. So if that's what you're focused on, okay, so this I can go through these briefly. I have one of these for each of the different channels. So this is I don't think you necessarily need to read it in great depth, but we have one of these for each. So the animal health and production channel, obviously we have coverage of health and production aspects for livestock and poultry, with a focus on several different elements. Aquaculture, we have detailed coverage of aquatic species and live feed culture in marine, brackish, and freshwater environments. This is one thing I would just note is that CABI, in the publishing business, we have a host of other different products that link up really nicely. For example, we recently launched an aquaculture collection, aquaculture and fisheries collection, which links up very nicely with this content here. So it's not something to be necessarily considered in isolation. Obviously, the compendium is in isolation a fantastic resource, but it's sort of part of a network of CABI publishing content, which is really quite exciting. The crop protection channel, this is relatively straightforward. Detailed coverage of crop pests and diseases worldwide. There you go. And that's obviously one of our most important and biggest channels, and it is one of the longest running parts of the compendium as well, but continues to be very important. Food safety and quality. This is a smaller, more recent one, but still very important. So coverage of foodborne contaminants and the food industry processes and practices to mitigate risks. Forestry, we have detailed coverage of forestry, tree species, and forest pests worldwide. And yeah, all of these things set themselves apart quite nicely. They're all individual focuses. That means that each channel in and of itself is an important resource. Detailed coverage of global horticulture, food crops. Yeah, that's important. That one obviously has some crossover with crop protection, but they nevertheless have important roles to fill each. And then the invasive species channel, this is hugely important. We have the coverage of invasive species threatening livelihoods and the environment worldwide, which is obviously a popular and essential channel. Seaborne pests, another fairly new one. Detailed coverage of seaborne pests and diseases of economic importance. And like I say, I'm not going to linger on these. We're going to touch briefly again on the commodity channels. This is just so we can spend a bit more time on any individual one. I should say that if anybody has specific questions, I'm not sure if we're planning to do questions at the end or what the plan is, but obviously about any individual channel, please do say, and we can go into it in more detail. Obviously, I've gone through these very quickly at quite a high level. Okay, so this is the bit where we're going to look a bit more closely at the compendium itself, because obviously that's the theory behind the compendium. That's the sort of high level view of what it's about, what its content and coverage is. But this bit here, we're going to look more closely at it as a tool. So we're going to look at the structure and content of a data sheet as well. So this is the compendium homepage. This is what you'd see if you went to the website here. And you can begin your journey here with a search for relevant content, just up here, or by exploring the most viewed data sheets. You can see the top two here. I think it's a list of 10, and at the bottom you can explore them. But you can also browse the compendium by channel. You can learn about contributing to the compendium. We work with a lot of authors to generate content for the compendium. Also requesting data from within the compendium. As I mentioned, there's a huge amount of data underlying all of this, which hopefully you'll see in a moment. And visiting our various help and information pages, including our editorial policies and that sort of thing. So that's just a brief visit to the homepage. Then we'll look at a data sheet more directly. So this is what you'd see at the top of the fall armyworm datasheet. So here we've got on down the left-hand side, you can see all the different sections present. Well, you can see some of them. There's a scroll bar. You can see some of the sections present in this datasheet. So I've highlighted that at the moment we're looking at the abstract and identity. Now, this abstract is a generated thing that explains the key sections that are in this list. I want to just note briefly the datasheet types at the top here. So this datasheet has the types pest, natural enemy, and invasive species. Every datasheet is assigned these types, and what that does is it dictates the channels that the datasheet appears in, as well as the sections of content that will be found in the datasheet. So there's a datasheet type for tree, and obviously there's data types and sections about trees, like silviculture and this sort of thing, that would appear on a tree datasheet, but not one for fall armyworm, for example. We also, just at the top here, top right, we have the PDF button. So this is where you can download the offline version of the datasheet. It contains more or less all of the content listed here, with some exceptions, but it's pretty comprehensive. And then we have at the top here the identity section. So this is a great start for the datasheet, because obviously we have our African common names. Then we have a list of other scientific names, and then international common names. So common names in loads of different languages. On this screenshot, you just see the English ones, but there's usually multiple other languages, and it contains the common names from them too, which is really good. And I can't remember if I note this later on, but I should very briefly note that that the names of the datasheet, along with a huge amount of other associated information, are contained within a very advanced system which underpins all of this, which makes it very powerfully linkable. And hopefully it'll be evident as I sort of go through the datasheet itself and we look at it. But it makes it powerfully linkable and powerfully queryable. So it's just a good thing to know that exists underneath all of this. The next section is just pictures. So this one is important to note that we have an in-house image specialist who selects images to show all aspects of a species, like habits and life cycle stages and all that sort of thing. So here I don't think this is all of them. It ranges from some to many pictures. but they should be pretty comprehensive in terms of showing what you need to see about a species. Following that, we have distribution. So for species where distribution is applicable, we have a separate distribution database which feeds into this. And within the datasheet, there are three different sections that deal with the distribution. So firstly, there's this map, which is great. It's very interactable with. You can see there's filters. I think again, it's just off the bottom of this screenshot, but you can export the content of a map just as a CSV or as a KML file for use with mapping software. We then also have a table, and I don't think I have that in the screenshot here, but we have a table with a distribution sort of place by place, and finally a text section. So I'll go into more detail in the difference between tables and text sections in a minute, but the text section sort of provides a summary of the content of the other two, if that makes sense, because obviously otherwise you end up just repeating repeating something three times, and that's not usually useful. But the summary nature of the text sections tend to be useful. Okay, so this is a nice side-by-side table and text section. So this is host and species affected. So here we've got a text section, a very brief one that just gives a quick summary of the hosts and species affected by fall armyworm. And obviously, fall armyworm affects a lot of species. This table underneath it lists, well, I mean, as best as we can, all of them. And it will be very, very long. So this is just a summary overview giving the numbers. So, it shows 353 host plant species based on authoritative review. So it summarizes there and then lists here. And one thing to note in this is that all of the names within this table and within many of the tables are reciprocal links to the data sheets for those species in the compendium. So if I were to select this Okra datasheet here, I would be taken through to the Okra datasheet, within which we'd find a table that listed fall armyworm as a pest, and you could follow that link back to this datasheet again, this sort of thing. So it's a powerful way of exploring the compendium content because you can follow these relationships through the links on the page. Okay, so that was my quick overview of the datasheet itself. Before I actually move on, I'm going to take one step back because I also meant to note that one of the things that's quite excellent about the compendium datasheets here is the nature of the citations and the references. So you can see in the host species affected section, we have a couple of references, and if you were to click on the reference, it would take you to the reference list at the bottom, and you'd be able to see the reference itself, but then follow where it's available, links then from that list through to, I think it's Google Scholar, Crossref, and also CAB Abstracts, our own bibliographic database. So again, sort of keeping the scientific basis for the content very much at the forefront of the whole data sheet, and also making it very explorable so you can keep the science up front. Okay. So yes, that was a very brief look at a data sheet. And as I mentioned earlier, if it would be useful to explore a data sheet in more depth, obviously we can do, but hopefully that gives an idea of what you can expect to see in different data sheets. I wanted to spend a moment just sort of talking about how we update the compendium, how we keep it current, how we keep it useful. So we do this in a number of ways, and obviously the aim is to keep it valuable, keep it current. Now, obviously, this includes commissioning species and subject experts, then contributing content. As I mentioned that before, that's kind of historically been very much and still is the core way to get this information into the compendium, because what makes it good. But then we also have regular and ad hoc data updates. So by that, I mean kind of wholesale data sets from be it research papers or databases available online, this sort of thing. We sort of we'll update our content with that as well, which tends to update many data sheets at once, which is great. And we're also looking at ways at the moment to link compendium datasheet content with, I mentioned CAB abstracts already, our bibliographic database. And the idea of that is that it would ensure that datasheets capture the most up-to-date research outputs. And that's well ongoing, but that's something we're quite excited about as a way of making sure that the compendium content is updated very much in line with current research. Then, in addition to seeking input from researchers and practitioners, we also aim to prioritize our content systematically to take account of a couple of different metrics around datasheet age, the amount of traffic generated by datasheets, and measures of research published relating to the species as an indicator of the amount of new information to be covered by datasheet updates. So this is just, yeah, to very briefly note that we have a system by which we sort of aim to prioritize choosing data sheets to update. But I mean, this is still very much informed by the experts we work with as well. So obviously we are happy to have them to advise us on what people need to know about. Right. Okay. So yes, just to mention again, in very brief, the three tools here, and I say we can go into a bit more detail on them if that would be useful, but just to touch on them briefly, built on compendium data, the Horizon scanning tool is a decision-making tool in terms of building a list of species that may be a threat to your chosen location. You start by declaring, I care about this geographic location, and I would like to know what species might come to me from this pathway or from these locations, this sort of thing. So it's kind of it's a decision support tool to build a species list of interest. The pest risk analysis tool is a bit more specialized in that it's a tool through which you can carry out the specific pest risk analysis process. And that's obviously, yeah, let's say more specific to people who need to do that. And then the invasive species discovery tool, it says here, is a power search of invasive species data sheets. It's a powerful set of filters that allow you to browse through the list of invasive species in the channel by saying, I care about ones that have this kind of impact or that are known to move by this pathway and that sort of thing. So it's got it's quite granular in terms of the filters, and it's a good way of exploring the invasive species content. Okay, so just the last couple of data sheets here. The last couple of slides here. This is just to note that we have a write a data sheet system, which is, I mean, by we it's not really a system. We just obviously work with a lot of authors to contribute data sheets to the compendium. And as part of that, we obviously are then happy to be able to present more up-to-date content to our users. But then we like to sort of set out the benefits to the authors themselves in terms of there being permanent DOI for citing your work. And there's also an honorarium that's paid to the authors as well, among other things. So just sort of to note that there, we're always keen to work with people to contribute content. Often our best updates come from someone who has a specific interest in one or two species and have been to the compendium and noticed that it's out of date or wrong because they have specific knowledge, and then they will contact us and say, I would like to write this data sheet, and that's always very welcome. Right. Then we also have, just to note that we have the data requests. I mentioned this on the compendium homepage. We have a data sales process through which users are able to request access to a whole range of different data within the compendium. I obviously showed very briefly a couple of data types within a data sheet, but distribution data and species relational data, taxonomic data, we did see examples of all of that. But yeah, when you might sort of say, I want to request the full host list of full armyworm, this sort of thing, or something smaller or something far bigger. And there's other data types as well that we didn't touch on. But yeah, there's a form, there's a process, and we're always happy to hear from people around that too. And another slide on the data requests. Actually on this slide, this is quite a nice one because you can got a couple of examples of interesting publications that were based on data requested through CABI Compendium. That's good too. And I think that's then it from me for the presentation. Yes, that's the last one from the slides. At this point I can stop talking, but I hope that was a good overview of the compendium, at least from the slide side of things. As I say, if people would like to see the compendium in a more live form, we can do that too. But yeah, I'm going to stop talking now. But thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you. Cheers.
James. And if you are listening to the recording and you have any questions, please email us. We'll be happy to answer. And have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Děkujeme a pokud byste měli jakékoliv dotazy, můžete se samozřejmě obrátit i na nás Albertiny a rádi zprostředkujeme odpovědi na vaše otázky. Takže děkujeme, příjemný den, nashledanou.